Jack?
Yeah. Wish him the best of health, and we'll call the order at 12:31. First item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone here from the public with any comments for anything that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll go right into the business.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
two of us have to leave
Yep.
within an hour.
Sure.
We can move 3, 8, and 9 up to the front of the agenda. Appreciate it.
All right. If there's no objection, is there any one of those three you want to take first?
We'll start with 3.
Okay. Review new Whale Street roadway and sidewalks and proposed golf cart, bike lane, and discuss scheduling a site visit. You want to take this item, Chief?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure what we're talking today, but just follow up from last meeting, we had put out a request and heard a request from the Nantucket Island Resorts and the boat basin, where they've experienced problems this summer running their golf carts up and down the sidewalk along New Whale Street there, as well as making trips over into the parking lot for with passengers, luggage, etc., as well as collection of trash and things. And they've asked, and they were told by the police they couldn't go the wrong way on Whale Street, but it would be impossible for them to so they either have to go on the sidewalk or they have to go on Whale Street. With the number of pedestrians we have down there, the sidewalk's not a good option.
No.
So my suggestion a couple weeks ago was to designate a lane down where we currently experience people parking, waiting for the boat. Just mark that out as a bike and golf cart lane. No stopping, standing, or parking, and that would take care of the problem and take care of a couple of problems. Rob threw in there that there's going to be some redesigning and redevelopment of that particular location. Again, I doubt that's going to happen by next summer. May be wrong, but in any event, we really need to get this fixed before next summer, and it continues to be the problem we had this year with pedestrians down there.
Okay. And is this right? We did sell on the 4-foot wide lane, or was it a 5-foot wide lane?
4 foot's probably big enough, just a regular golf cart.
Yeah. Now, one of the things we did want to do is talk about doing a site visit down at that location just to look at things. Do we want to still do that and schedule that? If so, we'd probably need to maybe pick a day and then follow up on it afterwards and maybe take an action.
I don't personally need a site visit. I think
Okay.
I mean, as one person, I know the area well enough, and I fully support the proposal. The only point of discussion, I guess, that would be in my mind is the method of delineation.
Okay.
Is how are we going to, make that clear? But otherwise, I think it's great. I think it's a double win to get the golf carts. It's just been a little concern of mine for a lot of years. Off of the sidewalk, and as well as people can't make the turn coming out of the A&P Stop and Shop parking lot with the people standing there. So I think it helps facilitate traffic flow, safety. I guess you could just stripe it, but I don't know how well that'll hold up with all the turning movements and the cobble. I don't know if you'd have to do some kind of raised border of some sort or tape.
Yeah, so my idea last time was to explore what was already on the books, which was NIR's willingness to widen New Whale in the direction of the waterfront.
Yeah.
And at the same time, try to widen the sidewalk in the opposite direction. So you end up with a narrower planted strip in the center between the road and the sidewalk. And to work to identify a particular corridor where you could ramp off of the sidewalk across New Whale, perpendicular to the parking lot, to access the needs of crossing the street, as opposed to running counter to the one-way, to solve that issue, and at the same time recognizing that the standing drop-offs would have more space to pull off to the side, outer lane of traffic to allow better swings of vehicles circulating through the parking lot and just dropping people off, or traveling through once they've dropped people off. I think the trying to establish a specific lane that's counter traffic runs counter to what this commission has looked at in the past or supported in the past.
Okay. So you're saying maintain the queuing lane for pickup drop-offs, actually improve that in the roadway itself by shifting the curb over a few feet, realize additional space in the sidewalk by widening out that sidewalk and hopefully realizing a cart lane in the sidewalk itself by going into the green area. So the green area will be reduced on both sides.
Yes.
Correct. Art?
Who's gonna do this design, or does our motion instead need to be to try to get to a funding or a proposal for a redesign of this area to then propose to NIR, or how do we advance this?
There was a question too about the ownership, and I don't know if that's been answered yet.
It's through an easement. The new whale is controlled by the town through easement for roadway purposes.
So it's all NIR owned, and we simply have an easement through there. So all of this would have to be certainly, I think the easement would have to be expanded upon for the town to take physical action out there to construct anything.
Does it seem, you had to?
Well, I just want to say that I like what Rob is saying. I think that the cars are going to queue up in that area anyway, and if there's a devoted golf cart lane, I think there's going to be competing purposes there.
I think you'd have to set something up so they couldn't,
Yeah.
you know, whether it be little stick stands or
Right.
something.
But
would have to be
it's a real logical place for them to be queuing up. It really works well. People just do it even though they're not supposed to now. They seem to just do it anyway. There is the one space, but it's pretty limited. So leading that way.
Okay. This does seem like it needs to get the owners involved to some extent. Do we want to make a recommendation to town administration that we have this go to a different group? Do we want to make a recommendation that we like both of these ideas, a queuing lane, a cart lane, a sidewalk, all have accommodating all three of these uses?
I think we all know the area, but I think
Yeah.
it definitely would still behoove us to do a site visit to actually see if what we're talking about here would be realistic to actually construct,
Okay.
as opposed to just think about it. So I do understand. I mean, but sometimes until you actually are all together in the field, fleshing out what we've been talking about here at the desk,
Yeah.
it's hard to say what would work or not.
So make a motion that we have a site visit with NIR
With NIR.
representatives, and
Okay.
I'll let you, leave it up to you to figure out a date.
Okay. It probably won't be next week. It'll probably be in November sometime.
Yeah.
Sound all right?
Sure.
Okay, we'll pick a date. Motion made. Is there a second?
Second.
Do you want to do that during the time the boat's coming or going so we can see the activity down there?
Yeah, we'll try to time that.
Because whatever you see won't be anything like what
I know.
is down there this summer.
That's true.
Unless we want to meet at 7 a.m. or something like this,
Yeah.
see the crews jump off. Okay, so we'll get the logistics of that figured out. We'll send that. Well, let's end the vote. Motion made, motion seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous. Item 8.
This one came up because the town manager directed the DPW director and myself to come up with something we could agree on to deal with people parking on the bike paths. And we understand there was a recommendation made by BPAC, which we weren't aware of or part of or whatever. Then I find out now that it wasn't a recommendation based by BPAC, it was BPAC endorsing a recommendation made by this committee. And it involved changing the regulations that would require, or that would add some language that made it illegal to park on the bike paths. sent to town administration a modification of that language that I thought would better convey the message to the enforcement people as to how to do it. The problem comes up in that it's the notice to the public. And when it comes to, okay, you gotta understand the hierarchy of laws in a sense. Traffic violation, which this would be, is the absolute lowest of laws. And it requires that a person be provided adequate notice that what they're doing or intend to do is illegal.
Yep.
On the opposite extreme of that, you have homicide, murder. You don't need a sign up that says you can't commit murder. That's a capital offense that is, inherent in human nature. So we have to provide. We can't even enforce parking downtown unless there's adequate signs up in the locations. Basically, a person parks the car, can see a sign that they can't park there. Okay, we have to do the same on the bike paths if we're going to enforce a no parking on the bike path. Don't get me wrong, there is a rule already, you can't obstruct a bike path, okay? But a partial, 2 wheels on a bike path doesn't necessarily constitute an obstruction. All right, but a vehicle blocking the bike path, there's never a problem with that. Plus, a lot of these bike paths are not on town-owned property. They're on property in which we've got an easement to put a bike path over. It's very difficult to tell a property owner, you can't park on the grass that you own next to this bike path. And we would never be able to figure that out.
Yeah.
What's on an easement and what's town-owned property.
Okay.
So I think the rule as proposed is an unenforceable rule.
Okay.
It would be very challenging unless we put signs up, as I said, at a minimum, probably every quarter mile on every bike path. And then you've got to tell me which roads this doesn't apply to, and how we're going to tell the public that.
Okay.
Because nowhere in the regulations does it differentiate between a bike path, a multi-use path, and a sidewalk. So I get a guy that's got a hair up his butt about India Street, and he says, hey, you got a rule that says you can't park on a sidewalk, bike path, whatever. He writes all those cars in India Street. What are we going to do? Because that'll happen.
Yeah.
As much as I'd like to say it won't, it'll happen.
I just
And how do we deal
say
with it?
from a public works implementation process, we're talking over 200 signs introduced island-wide now to support this effort. And when we're just finished making the argument that we've implemented this town-wide traffic
Speed limit.
Endorsement
To get rid of something.
to specifically eliminate about 200 signs. So, we talk often about kind of littering the landscape with signage that no one cares to read anymore. So, that just added to it. We could do it, it's a big effort, but I think it would be something specific that would require some implementation. That is sort of above and beyond the normal recommendations that's come out of the committee in the past as far as implementable under current budget situation would be. I mean, that's enough of an effort, materials-wise, that would cause a substantial change or need for a future implementation.
Yeah. Well, 30 miles of bike path, every quarter mile, you're looking at 150, 200 signs, something like this. How about stenciling?
Well, at the very least, you have to have notice wherever there's a point of access to that path
Sure.
for somebody to know they can't park there.
Yeah.
I think the stenciling myself would be just as ugly as the signs.
Okay.
I'd prefer to see signs that are regulatory. Stenciling is not.
I know parking stenciling on the path just says no parking.
Yeah, that's not regulatory. That you have to have an approved sign up to be able to enforce it.
Okay.
So.
And I think I'm still claiming naivete about being here for a short time. But in my short time here, what I've noticed is you have a lot of contractors parking in those median strips. And if that's the crux of the concern or complaints, I think there's some ability to go back to some of the regulatory boards and commissions, particularly planning, for site development, to be able to specifically identify on plans and or applications where work parties are to park, where materials are to be stockpiled, etc. And some of these clearly, with the permits that they need to get for construction material deliveries, there's blockings involved. There's certainly some very complex situations that come into play, whether it's deliveries of buildings or pieces of buildings, down to that involve parking constraints and or blockings of roads temporarily. That I think this work group could certainly provide some feedback to someone such as the planning board when considering single family or multifamily or subdivision developments.
Or could we even consider maybe requiring a bond of some kind to repair damages for construction, to go along with construction permits on property where that fronts on bike paths?
Yeah. Maybe that's.
When we see it, I will say that
Yeah.
I have definitely reached out to individual builders when I've seen substantial damages occur, particularly in the spring.
Yeah.
When you have folks parking day after day after day and just driving over these areas when they're wet and it just isn't conducive to keeping the grass there. So when I've noticed it, we've let them know, and they have gone and replanted those areas.
Okay.
But there's so much going on now. It's just another thing that's very difficult, if not impossible, to enforce.
Okay. Well, first, probably for some of the maintenance work or something like this, it doesn't necessarily involve a building permit. That probably run into an issue with controlling this through the plus department. Stenciling is a little bit of a surprise that it's not enforceable. The parking, the issue of within the road layout or it is a violation regardless. Whether it's in the road layout or on the property, there's some kind of violation going on. It's either they're not parking in areas designated for parking, which is a zoning enforcement issue. That's, you have to park in your driveway or certain designated spots.
If they're in the road layout,
Yeah, if they're not in their driveway, then they're doing one of two things wrong. They're parking illegally in the roadway or they're parking illegally on their own property. One or two things are happening.
I'd be
and
happy
both
to
are
let
enforceable.
zoning go take care of that.
Yeah, well, that's really the issue, and I think the first eyes that see the issue are the ones that have to make that decision. Do they get the zoning enforcement officer involved, or do they handle it themselves? One is probably cheaper than the other. I would think an on-street parking violation is cheaper than a zoning violation. But
One other
there
thing,
is
from a
recourse.
design standpoint, I mean, we're hearing from a lot of folks now down in the Surfside area, you know, they'd like to see something that is similar to the Altus layout, as far as separation between path and street, which I think makes a lot of sense. The more we get to that, the more space that we provide between the roadway and the path. I think that, other than potential erosion of the ground cover from driving over during that concentrated period of activity, if we're talking specifically construction related, you would get away from actual blocking of either the path or the roadway. So I certainly support, for others, that reason alone, but a lot of other reasons, having a more meaningful width, separating paths from roadways moving forward.
I mean, other than the grass getting, I'm not aware that there's been obstructions we haven't dealt with. I'm aware that there's people like landscaping trucks, they'll pull up and they got a trailer, they're gonna do a house or two along the street, and they'll pull up in a wide grassy area and park. Is there some reason that this conceived to be a good idea island-wide? Because I think it'll severely impact people's ability to do their jobs. in a lot of ways, and what's the real impact? I mean, if we got a contractor working on a house and they're parking, I saw that right down by my house. You know, they parked across the street, tore the grass up, while they planted a beautiful yard in the front yard that they did there. That's the town not going to them and saying, hey, you destroyed our property. We can deal with that in a way other than parking. Because I'll guarantee you, making no parking, they're going to park there anyway. What they'll do is they'll take the signs down. But I think it's just too big of a fly swatter to hit a gnat with, to be honest with you. And I'm telling you, I don't think it'll work.
Okay.
You know, it's too big of an issue.
Gotcha. Art, this is really
Sure, yeah. I mean,
proposal by you, so-
I was trying to get at a couple of things. You know, it's one of these. He's supposed to enforce it. The police, the zoning, and no one enforces it because no one seems to know exactly whose role it is. I go back to, you know, you have no zoning enforcement whatsoever. So that's a bigger issue. There is nobody that's charged in this town to notice a zoning violation. It is solely based on a report. It has to be called in. So that's a fundamental flaw in the operation that needs to be rectified. I know the town's working on that, but so perhaps that is a way. I was coming at it from traffic safety as well as sort of from an engineering perspective of seeing infrastructure being impacted. Brand new, the boulevard. Town puts all these resources in, and you know, to just have folks just doing what's sort of easiest, if you will, from traffic safety. I think it does impact often sight lines for, you know, people pulling out of driveways. These are areas that we're not supposed to have parking. I am happy to have the discussion. I understand that, you know, it maybe needs to be refined. We put it off for a few months before it went forward. So, but I hate to see it just dropped or death by committee where we haven't made any progress in terms of deciding how, you know, in terms of saying to the planning board, well, again, it's the same thing. They don't even track the permits that are issued. No one goes and checks to see if any of the conditions are enforced. Someone has to complain. So I don't feel that that's really a way to, you know, get at this. I think I see the point of easements and the difficulty there, but I also see main roads, Surfside, Old South Road, where you've got parking that happens in sort of obvious and plain sight, not going looking for a problem, but if you see something like this. And one of the things about signs I was wondering for discussion, but why couldn't this be an additional sign that is right below the signs that are used for notifying the public of the island-wide speed limit?
Different. Because the law actually says in the speed limit sign that you only have to post it in a couple of locations. That actually gives you that flexibility.
I see.
Where this is a little bit different situation here. This is more of a local regulation that a homeowner or a motorist, I should say, wouldn't have a reasonable expectation to know about it because it's different in every community. You know,
I see your point.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted the discussion. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to figure out a way, if
And-
there was a way to have something be done. I mean, the thing is, it not only impacts the bike path itself, it impacts the shoulders and the edge of the road, right? That is getting eroded. And
I think you can make an argument that we don't build our shoulders correctly. There's no actual shoulder on these roads.
there is a lot of
From
that.
asphalt to dirt.
But I'm hoping to try to figure out a way that, and I don't know that it'll be settled today. I think the discussion is a good one, but is there a way?
Just to clarify, are you talking about areas that have sort of been, have grown up to become turnoffs or pull-offs? Or are we talking about areas that are these transient construction sites?
A lot of it's construction, but a lot of it, and I took one picture today just coming down Old South Road where landscapers, good example. Now they're servicing that Emporium, storage facility. There's a giant parking lot that they could pull in,
Yeah.
but it's easiest to just pull along. Now all the cars that are trying to exit there can't see the oncoming traffic on Old South Road because the landscapers just parked there. And I think without any mechanism for enforcement, in other words, if they once were probably told you can't do it, you gotta, pull it, you got an option, you got a giant parking lot, but it's this human nature of perhaps doing what's easiest. And so it's some of those situations. And it might just be too big of an issue. I hear you. I'm wondering if there is a way.
I truly believe that through the planning board efforts, specifically, we could work to develop a construction special condition that talks specifically about having the contractor go back before getting sign off for the project being completed, whether it's a building permit or a permit that needs to be signed off to close the project. That would speak to low-end seating, during or following construction.
Okay. And I tried years ago to suggest a special condition related to a condition related to special permits, that there shall be no off-site parking associated with a particular issued permit. And that just was, we can't do it was the answer. I don't know, maybe you can get further on that, but that was my same thinking as, you're issuing permits and people are parking all over.
I mean, I can see that in a sense because,
It's hard.
well, you can't, if it's legal to park, it's legal to park along a road unless posted otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Certainly you can't be by fire hydrants, you're supposed to be a certain distance from intersections, you're supposed to, there's other criterias there that have to be marked out in order to be enforceable, really. Like, that's why we put the stripes on away from intersections,
Mhm.
et cetera. So you can't tell a guy that's working on that house, you can't park in that road that anybody else can park on but you, because you're working on that house. Okay? 'Cause
No,
that's
it's
that's a
discriminatory.
publicly funded road. He can park on any road where parking's legal. We go through this with Matt Fee downtown all the time in the winter because of all the construction down there. He'll say the contractors are parked all over down there. They have just as much right to park there as a guy that's going into a store to buy a T-shirt. It's a public road.
That's a good point.
You know?
I think it's addressing that, it's not addressing that, it's recognizing that, and that it's just specifically addressing the degraded areas that are specific to the construction.
Yeah, maybe that is the best way to
that's
say,
different.
before you get
Yeah.
a sign off,
Yeah.
someone from the town has to say that this area hasn't been degraded.
Right.
Well, they're
From the
mitigating
traffic.
it, they're not prohibiting it. Angus, did you have a
Well, I was
comment?
just gonna say, so you have like your focus is a little narrow. So, like, if we're talking about construction vehicles, I get it, cause we respond to this all the time, but what about like Harvard Fuel Truck and Silent Truck, and what about UPS and
Yeah.
FedEx, and what about all those other things
That do it every day.
that park there every day and cause what you just described on Old South Road, and that's okay?
Was the exemption in the regs for the delivery vehicles.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't think that's what we're talking about, though. I think we're
Right.
basically uniformly across everyone, just say no parking on bike paths.
Right, because
Anybody.
we have the turnoffs from post office trucks and the turnoffs from delivery
Yeah.
trucks that affect what you're talking about specifically. And we see that all throughout the town.
Yeah, but if there's specific turnoffs,
Well,
like, I can point out
They're
one
not
of,
just every mailbox.
no, but I'm saying, like, the ones that, there's some specific turnoffs on Fulton. There's one at Sankaty.
Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about, though.
Okay.
Right. I'm just talking about where they're kind of everywhere.
Mhm.
Right? And we don't pay any attention to that. I think what we pay attention to is that when a new house is getting a new roof or an addition or a new construction, that we see a lot of parking with all those different construction vehicles, paint right to the painting, to the alarm company, whoever's the last, right?
Temporary intense use.
Well, and then they're gone. And then the problem moves somewhere else,
Mhm.
right? And I think, so we saw that on Cliff Road, that was a big problem, the Sursa
Colfax.
Road, horrendous problem. The current one is the hospital, right? We don't wanna talk about that one because it's the hospital, but I like to talk about it. So, so we see that move, it's like a moving target, you know what I mean? Like, so I can't imagine how, so the enforcement piece is challenging.
right.
If not impossible, like the chief keeps mentioning.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I
And so signs, can I just talk about the signs just real briefly?
Sure.
Would be
Sure.
that an often defense when you get a parking ticket is there was no signs because some wise ass knocked it down or removed it, right? And so someone parks here thinking that it's okay to park there because they're from Ohio and they're here for the weekend or a week to enjoy a vacation, right? So they come and they say, well, geez, I got this ticket, but there's no signs. And so they look at, well, sure enough, there's no sign because somebody took it down. Not that there wasn't one there originally, but someone took it down. So to my end, to the point there is that unless the signs are, like the chief mentions, when we talk about trespassing, they usually use a rule of thumb of 50 feet. Well, that's not necessarily true. It just has to be adequately
Visible.
invisible. You know what I mean? It could be 500 feet, you know, if you can't miss the sign, right? So that's the same with the parking. If not, somebody's gonna say, well, how come I can park here but I can't park there? Well, there's no sign. You know, this would be challenging if it wasn't uniformly put up.
I mean, we originally thought we could just post a sign at the beginning of a bike path that said no parking along the bike path. Well,
Yeah.
do that on Nantucket Road, then you realize people pull off a cliff, off of a crooked lane onto Nantucket Road, and they don't see that sign.
Yeah.
You know, so you gotta have, adequate signage has gotta be there, because like I said, it's not, this isn't something that's unique and common amongst all jurisdictions.
Okay.
Well, I guess I would just add that good discussion. I mean, that's just part of, I think, why we're here for this. It is part of why I think that these two agenda items have kind of morphed together a little bit. I was trying to get specifically at something would be enforceable to say by defining the bike path, right? So you kind of have two issues. You got the one over, but it just say, geez, it just seems wrong that people could just park on, you know, bike paths. So realizing the sidewalk issues, the third rail, I was trying to separate that out to say, leave that one alone and just establish it. I hear what you're saying on the signage. I was thinking perhaps the point of entry. I understand maybe that doesn't work. I wonder about, though, how is it any different than no motorized vehicles on bike paths, right? So you see a few of those signs around, but the public's not really,
Yeah,
there's not a sign.
but we don't have a problem with motorized vehicles on the bike paths generally. When they do get on there,
Right.
we get called and we go deal with it.
Yeah,
They're
right.
not on there for
Yeah.
10 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just sort of, anyway, I think I'll let it go.
No, I agree.
I was trying to figure out a way to, and especially like the picture that was in the packet, right? You guys just finished paving this thing. This guy's got his tractor in a trailer sitting on a bike path that doesn't have, you know, it wasn't designed for dump truck
It
loads.
drives me crazy every week, the big semi with the haze down there
On-
on South Shore Road.
Those were the things I
South-
was trying to
whatever,
figure out a
South Shore
way.
Road.
Maybe there isn't.
But-
That's what I was trying to get at.
Well, is there action? Because we do have an existing recommendation that did go to town administration.
Yeah,
Right now,
I'd
we're
make-
kind
I'd make a
of
motion
hammering
that
through
we-
logistics. So do we have an action?
I'd make a motion that we recall that previous recommendation. Till we can further-
Motion to recall the recommendation. Is there a second? Rob is the second. Yeah. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? And the chair will be opposed as well, so they'll go 3-2.
I would make another motion
Go ahead.
that we pursue discussions with the planning board or planning department about other alternatives to this, to include conditions, special impositions, special conditions, what would be other things that I've just,
Special condition associated with off-site parking to address restoration of degraded areas. Right. Resulting from construction.
It's not always a special condition,
no, but
I mean, sometimes it's just a building permit.
most of the time it's probably just a building permit with these houses.
Yeah, this might be something just to spur
There needs to be a
conversation.
bylaw
with
at some
them.
point.
Unless it's a second dwelling or a development, there is no special.
You covered a lot
Yeah,
with
you're probably
second
right,
dwellings.
maybe a bylaw might.
Yeah, well, that's kind of just
Starting the process.
toss the ball over to the court of the planning board and see what creative ideas they have. They may know the regulations well enough to where they can recommend something productive.
Can I recommend that you pursue action with a plus and not necessarily the planning
Yeah.
board?
Yeah, friendly modifications made.
It could be just a sign off on the car, which is plenty of.
Yeah.
On a building permit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Goes and inspects the area, make
Yeah,
sure it's
DPW
remediated,
does.
and then you get
So
your
they can-
CO.
Go on straight away.
so plus as part of the
Rob,
inspection.
on
Okay.
his lunch break.
All right, so motion by Bill Pittman, is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Item 9, discussion regarding parking enforcement related to yellow, no parking lines. This is the same thing, right?
I think we just beat. I think we
that
just
worse.
did that one, but
Okay.
it's up to you guys.
If it's all right, we'll go to item 5.
Yeah, what was the issue with 9? I didn't remember.
It was the same sort of thing. Like in my example, if I may, Chairman, was like right on the corner here of Fairgrounds and Old South, right, where you've got a sign that says no parking here to corner,
Right.
and all those people park in that shoulder, clearly in the road layout. They're well inside of a yellow line, so there's no ticketing that happens. Or the Surfside one where the guy's parked right under a no parking sign, but he's off the asphalt. It was a discussion to discuss how is something like that handled.
Okay.
And I think our initial discussion was we'll call it in, but what I was hoping to get at was sort of on these main type, right across from the police station, does someone have to call that in?
Well, I can tell you the deal with the police station, because we get this all the time. When there's a meeting in here and the overflow traffic,
That's okay.
and they park up and down,
I-
we ticketed those people one time.
Oh, my God.
And
We
I
are-
thought all of us were gonna get fired.
I
We cannot do that. And, that's gonna be that's a good example of why these laws are bad ideas, because, the fix here would have been to put the 110 space parking lot in that was designed with this building. But nobody thought anybody would come to meetings here. And now they do, and they park all over the road,
And we-
all over the
And
people's
we have to
road.
assign a police officer out there to manage the traffic as a result of illegal
Yeah.
parking.
Well,
And
just-
so we don't, we would never,
Gotcha.
never, if we would go out there, if somebody called in and complained, if there was a vehicle that obstructed the view, we may try to locate that owner and have them move, but we're never gonna ticket everybody up and down the road again.
Gotcha.
for doing
Well, I guess we'll got to stop regulating the fishing industry, and then that
Yeah.
won't happen.
well, I wasn't really
Problem
being
with
specific,
those
if I may, to events. That might happen, a funeral, it's being held. I wasn't trying, I was saying like your sort of routine occurrences, and I'm talking about the one across the street, the housing that's got the cars, going back to the road, that park there every day, and there's a no parking here to corner sign, or on Surfside Road, the one I had the picture of for a year, he's been parking under a, no parking on this side sign. So that was the discussion, is where does that,
And Art, if it's all right, I'm going to go completely to item 5, because that's what item 5 is to talk to this particular issue. So let's go straight to that if it's all right. This is a request for no parking along the entire length of First Way from Surfside to Hooper Farm, and I'm going to scroll all the way to.
It does bring up,
There's bookmarks in there,
it does bring up a good
Well,
point, though.
if I was talented enough, I would use
If there's
that.
adequate space to park between, the roadway and a path,
Yeah.
even if there's a yellow line out there, the yellow line is,
Well,
intended to keep people from impeding
Yep.
the roadway.
sure.
So
And-
if you can physically park
Yep.
between the edge of the roadway, behind the yellow line, and a path or sidewalk,
Yeah.
is that something that,
Well, let me answer that as part of
That's
this.
the discussion.
because That's part of this request, is number item 5, designate no parking. I would ask that this group make a recommendation to designate no parking either side, the entire length of First Way. And if this becomes an issue with how this van is parked, then I would suggest that this is a zoning violation, as we talked about earlier. There is, in the zoning bylaw, statute that says that you are to park in certain designated areas, that being your driveway. This obviously is not, therefore it's triggering one or two violations. Either it's triggering a no parking in the street violation, which it's ambiguous whether this is, because there's no sign there for no parking on the street. If that's not an issue, if it is parked, designated no parking either side, then, and there's ambiguity of whether it's in the roadway or not, then it becomes a zoning violation. So
So let
this,
me ask you this question. So what if the person who parked there is not the property owner?
then there would still, I would still
How do you
suggest that it's,
enforce that?
I would ask you
Yeah,
that
but what
question,
if-
but.
but what if
So
it's
is
in the
it-
road
this-
layout?
well, this is in the
Yeah.
road layout, and this is a site distance issue.
And
Yes.
you can't charge a property owner that's adjacent for that very reason. Just that could be the guy jumping on the High Line that's getting
Yeah.
picked up right there.
Is it, that's by the athletic field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's another,
So that's not a violation. So like, so if, for regards to the police responding,
Yeah, it's ambiguous. Certain areas of First Way are designated no parking either side. The signage stops
as far as
right
the
about
police
this area.
enforcement dog is telling
Yeah,
you that
yeah.
there's no sign there, and
Yep.
that's not impeding the roadway or the traffic flow, or rescue from getting through there,
Sight distance?
or even sight distance.
yeah, it looks like it's more than 15 feet away from the intersection, probably.
And we would look at that as it's parked right there, as it obviously is often parked like that, as I see it all the time, and take no enforcement action. Even sight distance, Rob. I do recognize that we do ticket that on occasion, sight distance issues there, intersections are clearly impacted. Often happens on like Tashma and Surfside, Washington and Surfside, right around the corner.
Sure.
We will ticket cars that are impeding the sight lines because you can't pull out from Surfside.
Okay, Erica?
I just wanted to note that if anyone is considering making this road no parking from end to end, please note that the section adjacent to the superintendent's office is used for parking, for people who are visiting that office, because there's no visitor parking there, and also the buses park there on occasion. So I would maybe exclude that one section, or maybe make it for school use only or something.
Well, I have not, did somebody complain about this, or what's the?
Yeah, I got a call and a complaint, and then I went to go look at it, and that's how we put it on the agenda.
Specific about that vehicle or in general? Because there's a lot of times whenever there's games and,
It's
like you
the
said,
neighbor
at certain
who
times
doesn't
of the
want
day.
that vehicle there.
Yeah, that's not a reason to, because that's a high-use road with a high-use area.
Okay.
Um,
So from police standpoint, enforcement, there's not
No.
safety.
No,
Okay. Okay.
I almost wonder if it gets to a bigger policy discussion that says, if a road is designated along any particular side, no parking, does that only apply to the traveled way, or could it be interpreted to apply to the road layout? Which would be more logical to me, right? That's that essentially it would go to the layout, not just to the traveled way. Because now you're having the situation again where when this continually happens, you're going to have a degradation of the edges of your road. They're not made to have pullouts just anywhere. Roads will crumble and fall apart. And again, big issue, but thinking about as Nantucket's growing and the strains and the infrastructure, it seems to me that if a road is designated no parking this side, doesn't mean get two wheels just inside of the yellow line. I know we've had this discussion, Ocean Ave, and going back a decade probably, right? But what is is it possible for an interpretation that says essentially it's the layout?
Well, again, that'd be a tough one for us to make the call. But let's say that vehicle parked there every day, and it didn't belong to the property owner, and they called the police, we'd go there and say there's no violation, but it's on your property, you can tow it, okay? All you have to do is notify the police department, but you better make sure it's on your property.
But what if so it's not? What if it's in the road layout? That's my point is.
Then I don't think it would be any violation, because it's on the shoulder of the road.
Yeah.
And then you get to
not impeding traffic.
Yeah.
well, again, you get to the point where you're in a curve, you're on the inside of the curve. I would argue you're just upstream of a driveway on a downslope, parked the wrong way. I would say that
There'd be a violation.
you're potentially impeding sight distance.
That inner school driveway going to NES and NIS is right in front of it.
Yeah, but more to that is sort of back to that other discussion about parking along the paths and the roadways. If it's not necessarily an intense construction project, but a daily use of a shoulder that degrades over time, that turns into a maintenance issue for public works, or potentially leads to degradation of infrastructure. Someone's responsible. We're trying to maintain it mowed and established, and it's becoming erodible because of its constant use, it's definitely a concern.
That's what I was trying to get at.
So that car's there all the time, so it probably belongs to
I
whoever,
think it belongs to Gloria or somebody that lives there.
so maybe the zoning should go paying the visit and say, you know, you're not parking in your driveway.
That was, the point of this is to establish no parking on street, so there would be one or two avenues to take. Either it was a zoning violation of not parking within your designated area, or no parking within the street. That was kind of the point. To me, it seems like Rob's correct, they're parking in the wrong direction, on the wrong side of the road. And I do think there's probably some sightline issues with this, but,
Well, but you know, there's no law that says you can't obstruct sightline. The
Yeah.
law says you can't park within a certain distance of an intersection. You can park a semi there, as long as you're not within, I think, was it 15, 20 feet of the intersection?
And impede the traffic, the safe
Yeah.
flow of traffic.
Right. So when we say sightline, we just gotta make sure that it's not just sightline. They could block the site, but if they're more than, let's say it's 20 feet, I don't remember off the top of my head. They're 20 feet or more from the intersection, don't matter.
Okay.
You know,
all right,
because there is no law that says you can't impede the site.
correct. Best practice is probably something else, though.
Well, that would be a design, practice in roadway design.
Exactly, and I think this is what this is trying to get to, is that we design the roadway to where we allow parking and we don't. I know time's getting short. Do we want to hold this off for a month, or make a motion for no action, or make a motion to support designation of no parking? Or we hold off for the month because there are some conditions along other areas that maybe we do want to allow parking in a pocket of the roadway layout. You want to hold this off for next month?
Yeah.
Okay, so item 5 we'll table for November. And just for clarity of the minutes, item 9, we're just going to take no action for that item.
Okay. That's a take no action motion
Correct.
by unanimous consent.
A consent, yes. Going back to the top on item 1, and you guys let me know when we're getting close to the hour. Review request for stop sign at My Comet Road at intersection of Pond View Road. My homework was to pull out a layout. That's what's provided to you in this 11 by 17.
Thank you for pulling out the layout. I pulled the deed, and I think what's interesting about the layout as it relates to the actual construction is that My Comet Ave to the south of Pondview completely leaves the layout and goes over private property. So I think part of what's contributing to the problem here, or let's say maybe even creating the concerns, has a lot to do with the configuration of the existing layout, which is outside of the layout.
Okay.
And so, while it may not be the easiest solution, relocating My Comet Road to within the intended layout, the Pondview is a private way. And so I think the request, correct me if I'm wrong, was to introduce a stop sign at the end of Pondview?
No,
Just
on
on
My
my
By
Comet.
My Comet,
at Pondview.
okay. At Pondview.
Yeah. I'm
I-
sure it's our pleasure to make any recommendation we think would be the safest. There, on this plan here, there are corner bounds marked out. I haven't gone to the field to double check those. Maybe a suggested action would be, Rob, that we do a site visit, you and I, to take a look at this area and see if there's a recommendation we can bring back to this committee.
Is there any downside to putting a stop sign where they're asking? Is there a good reason not to do it?
We were looking for basically
Well-
cutting back vegetation for sightline visibility, and maybe that would address
The only thing
it.
it would do is establish liability if they hit somebody.
Yeah.
Well, they run it.
But to that point,
Hopefully it won't stop.
cutting back vegetation for sightline, we would be limited to doing trimming within the layout,
Correct.
right? Not
Correct.
on private property, which is on view, which is part of the issue that we struggle with in any kind of vegetation management program, which would really help eliminate the concerns here. I think the combination of the two of putting My Comet where it ought to go, where it ought to be, where it's allowed to be, and trimming back, opening up those intersections, vegetation management is really, that's a good solution.
Yeah, right now, the stop sign comes down onto is invisible if you're driving down onto anyway, the existing.
There's,
I've taken pictures of that one, where I had to replace it, this all came up, and, cause they had wanted it on this side, which I couldn't do.
Yeah.
Which even if I did, that wouldn't be visible because of the brush also, but
Yeah.
coming down onto, you can't even see the existing stop sign, because of all the vegetation. on both sides
Sure.
of the pond.
Frankly, my initial thought on this was, well, we should be able to just trim back my comment sufficiently enough to open up that sight line, until I looked at the GIS layout and saw that my comment is well outside of the layout on private property.
From the GIS map.
No, I can confirm that. I've surveyed the property to the south. I haven't submitted public plans, but there is an easement. I'm not sure who the beneficiaries of that easement without doing a little more research. But I can tell you by survey, it's, the problem with relocating the road are the wetland regulations. And you're right up, I mean, as it is, that whole road goes underwater where it is. So if you try to move that to the west, I mean, it still might be a way to go, again, add it to the list of resiliency. You would have to maybe have perhaps a wall of some sort and elevated, and it would be, it would be a pretty major type of an infrastructure undertaking.
but this also isn't the first case where we have public roads for private property, usually with dirt roads.
Well, but with all respect to the maintenance issue, it's, I think, heightened concerns, especially if you've got someone raising concerns about safety, and then you go and do the work.
Well, part of that was recently with the expansion of sewers, they, going through the alignments of where the proposed sewers were gonna go, they found lots of cases where the road meandered outside the layout. In order for them to do the work, they had to go in and secure easements or cables, for all those areas, because they found it more challenging to permit putting the road where it should go. What's the pleasure of the committee?
Yeah.
So we can't trim the bushes.
Well, I think we can, but we're gonna be very limited on what we can do, and that's generally right at the intersection for a very limited stretch from the right edge eastward until we run up against the private property, which is the Pondview layout and 144 to the south.
Couldn't do it even with permission from 144.
Well, I think maintenance of a public right-of-way layout, not to split hairs, but maintenance of the public right-of-way layout would be different than trimming further into private property.
To be honest with you, I don't care if we put a stop sign up or not. I don't think it's gonna make a bit of difference safety-wise.
Yeah.
I'm just more concerned that there's a problem there that can't get addressed, that really would make a difference safety-wise.
Art, you said you do survey work there. There are quarter bounds in
I
the
mean, I'll
field.
walk that route quite a
Why
bit.
don't we just
Okay.
go back to this person and say, your association or your road group needs to cut back your vegetation?
It's not necessarily an association. It might just be that private owner.
People contribute to roads when there's not an association.
I mean, the owner may be willing to do it.
I would say, again, with what the chief said, we're happy to install a stop sign. However, I wouldn't literally just go out and install a stop sign. What would be the right thing to do is to work
You have to have
together.
a public hearing anyway.
Work together with the complainant to trim back the whole corner, see if that makes enough of a difference to potentially avoid the stop sign, and if not, continue to move forward with implementation. But vegetation management really goes a long way in making it safe.
You want to sculpt that into a motion for the
Can we go back to do you have the package of the original information? Is that right at the top there?
Yes, I think it's, page 1, 2, 3, 4 of the, packet. Well, it's,
Yes, that's,
they want a stop sign on My Comment Road where it intersects Pondview.
Hercules Sagalas? Do we know where he lives?
He's down on Pondview, further down.
I also have a survey plan that I could share with the group, which is a recorded easement across what's shown on the land court plan in front of you as number 3. On just a preliminary review, it appears that the easement is simply to benefit lot number 4. However, what it shows that I think might be helpful, and since we're discussing it here to make it part of the public record, I'll distribute this land court document. It shows a location by survey of the existing dirt track as it relates to these properties. And I think just to verify basically that what you're seeing on the GIS is, here you have a stamp plan that's showing the same thing. And I don't think you can do any work south of that intersection, it appears.
Do we grade that road?
we do.
Okay, so for the benefit of time, we'll table this for next month, and Rob, I guess in the meantime, between now and next month, we'll see what the possibilities are and then report back.
Do we have contact information for this Hercules?
We have an email address. Yeah, it appears that's the only thing we have is just your email correspondence.
I guess I will reach out to them and have a discussion about what the association may be able to do to help the situation.
Okay. So if there's no objection, we'll table this for November. Item number 2, review proposed Lovers Lane, Orpawa Avenue, Montahanset improvements. Again, this is ongoing discussion from a previous traffic safety meeting. Rob, sure.
We have a member of the public here for item number 4. Is there a reason we couldn't?
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, if we're gonna lose the 2 gentlemen, therefore you lose your quorum. I came from Connecticut to answer any questions you have about item 4. You could consider that.
Absolutely. If there's no objection, we'll go ahead and just jump to item number 4. Let me get through all these slides. Shoot, where are we at? There we go. Where's a good picture? Okay. Item number 4, just make sure we go back to 2 at some point. Item number 4, request for elimination of a parking space on Ash Street across from driveway belonging to 45 Center Street. Sir, please, shoot. Rob, could you help him out with the microphone there with the, we're being video recorded with, there's the microphone. Erica, can you use the one that's there against the wall?
I don't know if it's on.
And tap it.
They should all be on, I checked.
Okay.
Oh yeah, you're good. That's live.
There.
I didn't realize you were being recorded. All your mics should be on when you're talking.
Yeah, we're,
Otherwise, it won't.
I'm sorry, ma'am. Can you come to the mic to deliver that message?
just state your name for the record and all this.
Dennis Perry. I'm the owner of 45 Center Street.
All right. 45 Center. Go ahead.
The request that we've submitted is you see that there are 3 parking spaces on Ash Street, which is the part of the Ash Street that approaches Center Street. Our driveway, our garage is directly across from that first vehicle, which prevents us from being able to get in and out. About a year ago, you added yellow lines on the Ash Lane side of Ash Street that designate no parking. That was helpful. Unfortunately, the yellow line continues past the no parking sign, so people don't see the line, they see the sign, and therefore they park where they feel like it. As a result of this, I can't get into my garage. It's a narrow garage that needs a generous arc in order to get in. This all came about, we bought the house 26 years ago, when Ash Street parking was on the other side of the street. So I don't know if any of you are here. This probably predates most of you. But you could literally park not on the side of the street where you're parked today. You parked on the other side of the street. Nobody could park in front of a garage. So I never had this problem. Then it flipped, and I don't know why it flipped. But all of a sudden, the parking went from our side of the street, if you will, to the other side of the street. There are 3 parking spaces that are permitted on the current side of Ash Street, one of which prevents me from getting into my garage. And so we're asking if the number of spaces could be reduced from 3 to 2 so that we would have a sufficient arc to be able to get in and out of our garage safely. Why this has become an issue for us is that we have a handicapped adult son who lives with us in the summertime, who lives in a group home in Connecticut where we are from. But when he's with us, I need to be able to get him in and out of the driveway or the garage predictably. And I can promise you right now that what I deal with are people who choose to ignore the parking signs, who ignore the yellow lines, who as recently as the other day told me that I needed a smaller car so I could get in and out of my driveway. There's not a lot of regard for the parking designations on Ash Street. And I think it has to do with the fact that there is a congregational church, and people see that as an opportunity to park illegally because, as they tell me, the signs don't pertain to when services are occurring. You've heard this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Or when there are performances at Bennett Hall, the signs don't pertain because the performances overrule or override the parking restrictions. Or when there's a wedding taking place, or when they have a restaurant reservation at Languedoc. All sorts of things come up. We are patient people, but our patience is wearing a little thin. And what we'd like to do is simply ask the town so that we don't have to keep calling the police department and say, this is not an emergency, would you please come and ticket the people who are illegally parked? It would be a lot easier if the signage could be designated properly, if the spaces could be reduced from 3 down to 2, which would give us unencumbered access into our garage. That's why I'm here.
Thank you.
I just want to ask a clarifying question, Mike.
Sure.
Since the gentleman's here, is there a specific space of the 3 that you would recommend eliminating?
Yes, it's as you come up Ash Street, as you're approaching Center Street, it's the first of the 3 spaces on the. If you look at the screen, it's the first of the 3 spaces, which is directly across from our garage. The second space and the first space take you to Center Street, so it would be the first of the 3. Interestingly, when you added the yellow line, which was done last summer, you did so to accommodate a house on Ash Street that had been an inn. That had been an inn. Now, there's a separate story here because there's egress. But when the yellow lines went in, it was to extend the no parking on Ash Street to allow for the people who bought what had been an inn access to what had been created as a driveway. That's at the other end of this yellow line, and there's never an issue of people overlapping or over parking. It only happens as you get close to Center Street. At the space that I'm asking you to remove, and I believe the neighbor has already been here to talk to you, there is egress into the basement behind that black car. But because the road narrows, people routinely park on the sidewalk. It's there. People do that because they don't want to get sideswiped, which has happened to me when I park on the side street. So people step up under the curb, preventing that egress from being actionable or effective. So I'm not here to speak for them, although I will tell you that I'm aware that there was some discussion about the ability for that egress to have utility as a consequence of the way people park, which is a function of the narrowness of the road. Eliminating that first of the 3 spaces addresses the egress question for our neighbor. So we're basically being asked to extend the line
to basically there.
and put a sign adjacent to
Yeah.
it.
Interestingly, you see where the yellow line is right now?
Say that again?
We had this, when this issue came up
Yeah.
with egress, there's no way of getting the sign in the sidewalk, and obviously it's not only just narrow, but there's footings on the ground.
What if
Unless the property owner, and this has happened on Fayette Street, the property owner, especially in this instance, if we do extend the yellow line,
Mount
might
it to
give
the
me permission
building.
mount it
To the
on the
house,
house, which
yeah.
I did for Diane Coombs on that property, and we used to have it on the old too. That's why the sign never got put in there and got brought back. Oh, this was coming back.
Yeah, because I thought.
I thought we dealt with
I
it.
thought we'd already made that no parking.
Right.
No, we didn't take away the parking, there was something about putting a sign there that says no parking on the sidewalk or something. That was the final
Okay.
part. But I couldn't get the sign.
There's a sign right there, though. I mean, below the yellow line, there is a sign.
No parking on the yellow line, yeah, that was, and then there was 2 hour parking.
Yeah, there you go. So that sign, as you can see, is before the yellow line. Nobody sees the yellow line. They drive up to the sign. They figure, well, if I'm halfway in, halfway out, I'm okay. So now they have
So
completely.
this sounds like it's gonna be a two birds with one stone.
You're,
Your previous motion was to install a no parking on sidewalk sign with an arrow pointing
That
to
wasn't me.
Center Street.
No, our motion.
This was the previous motion for 43 Ash, or for Mrs. Kennelly at 43 Center.
right.
Motion to install a no parking on sidewalk sign with an arrow pointing towards Center Street. Locate the sign against the curb at 43 Ash Street.
That was our neighbor,
Yes.
and I'm aware of that.
I just want to make sure they know what they are.
And I was unaware of the outcome. All I know is that I can't get into my garage. But in the elimination of the space would allow me to do so.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, and I think that there is a little difference between the two requests. Last time, this committee is very sensitive to trying not to eliminate parking. And so what we were trying to do was get off the sidewalk but keep the parking, she could get out. What I'm hearing now, though, is that you need that, plus you need to remove the northerly-most parking space, essentially the one that's furthest down the hill, in order to
Yes.
Accommodate the current applicant.
Correct. So I point out the egress piece only because I'm aware that there was a prior conversation. My issue is our ability to have a sufficient arc that takes you into a slightly sloping and narrow garage.
Not that it matters, but just for the history of it, you mentioned you owned for 26 years. I'm curious if you know approximately when the shift occurred, and is the,
Oh, back up one.
I guess, are we hearing about it for the first time now because your son is now joining you in the summers?
It's
Has this been an ongoing?
It's
year-
been we bought the house 26 years ago. You'll find this interesting. While we were living in Hong Kong, sight unseen. Best decision we ever made. Great happy house. That said, I just retired, so I have time to do things that I had no time to do before. Sure. So I've been putting up with this issue, quite frankly. Our son lives in a group home in Connecticut. He does spend most of the summers with us, and frankly, I have time to get around to this, which I just didn't have time before.
I'd make a motion that we eliminate parking up to that egress, just past the egress, and that we request the homeowner there that allows place a sign
Second.
on the property.
And please know, what traffic safety is voting on is a recommendation. This action needs to be approved by the select board.
Okay. And how does that happen?
It goes through,
A lot of times it's
The
just
town manager
automatic
and the
ministerial done, but
Is it helpful to the process if I were to come back and speak at that as well,
if they actually put it on the agenda.
as opposed to deciding independently?
I would say, particularly since you have the time now, there is,
Thanks.
and I say that with all due respect, only because the sensitivity to eliminating a parking space
I know.
is very high, and so there really does need to be a justification to qualify that.
I have the time, and this is, it is important to us. I literally, our son has a shunt in his brain, which is a vehicle to help the brain drain, which his does not normally do. If anything were to ever happen, if he were to take a tumble and I had to get to the hospital, I need to get out of my driveway. And right now, that's somewhat inhibited. So I have the time to come back if that's the thing that's going to make this process come to conclusion to be helpful.
Sure. Motion's made, seconded. Let me ask one question here. This looks like 2 driveways,
It's a driveway, that's our driveway, and then there's the garage.
and there's a garage. Is that an accessible garage? Do you park in the garage?
If I can get in.
But you pull into the garage, you don't park on the sidewalk.
No, you pull in. No, parking on the sidewalk would prevent people from being able to walk. So the driveway has a tri-fold door, so it's, as opposed to a door that flips up.
Yeah.
And so you just slide it open and in you go. Jeeps fit in, other cars don't.
Okay. All right, motion's made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous?
Thank you, ladies and
Get
gentlemen.
you one of those little, little cars.
Well, honestly, some fellow the other day said to me on Columbus Day, you need a smaller car. It's not a big car.
It looks like we're starting to get a bit of a, so let the minutes show Bill Pittman's leaving at 1:40.
If you got something to vote on, Lieutenant can stick around for the PD.
Well, because you're not gonna have a quorum on these
2 of us or 1 of us?
two.
Yeah, but
Yeah, we will, because we'll have
If
4
These two,
those 2 can sit in.
if they have, yeah.
designees.
Are still representing.
Let's finish.
Okay, so, Angus,
You wanna change?
I have no idea how you document this in the minutes.
Bring them back up for revote.
What do you need to have happen?
Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
You can say that Chief Pittman and Rob McNeil left the meeting at 1:42 and were replaced by Lieutenant McVicker and myself.
Good. All right, let's go back up to item number 2, review proposed, well, shoot.
Yeah, you just.
I'm just gonna say nothing to update here, other than we're aligning the bike path. Well, you have the presentation in the meeting packet. The bike path is being aligned along Lover's Lane, working with the stakeholders for the state forest and the Camp Richard groups to have the bike path aligned through that property rather than in the roadway itself. And then for the balance of the project, the bike path will be on the south side of Orkawa and the east side of Monahans to reduce as much as possible intersection conflicts and driveway conflicts along that section.
Can we talk about this a little bit?
Yeah.
Oh,
I have a
yeah,
question.
I'm blowing over it, but, you know.
No,
it's
yeah,
just
I'd definitely like to discuss it.
Okay.
So I'm wondering, when I look at the presentation that's in the packet for Lover's Lane, I just want to be clear with what you're saying. I'm seeing something different than what you just described. I see a bike path proposed within the layout, and you're saying that it's going to go onto Camp Richard property?
The stakeholders for the State Forest and Camp Richard are open to the concept of locating the bike path on their property to give more of a rural, separated, wooded aesthetic to the path. It's a little bit counter to a previous recommendation we made to avoid takings
Right.
on that, but I believe this is being cooperative and non-hostile. That it's not going to be a take. That there would be that they actually want
Voluntary
the path.
easement.
Yeah, they actually have a trail along that edge. It's
Yep, I
very
ride
sparse.
it. No, I know it.
And what about the state with the Department of Conservation and Recreation?
Again, this is the concept right now. If there's obstruction or hurdles and stuff that just can't be overcome, then I think we'll go back to the drawing board. But this seems to have some legs here.
Why does Lover's Lane need to be paved?
Oh, I think it does.
I don't think it's gonna be speedway.
Yeah.
More so than it already is.
It will be, and that'll be enforcement. And I think that, unfortunately, the development that was approved is why, you need to have road improvements. I wish it wasn't the case personally, but I think that if we don't look at other ways to move that amount of traffic off of Old South Road,
Yeah, it's not just that will obviously there's accessibility issues to create more options for people, for the driving public. There's also an infrastructure issue with drainage and improving that quality within the public way, adding drainage infrastructure. There's also a maintenance issue. Right now it's a busy dirt road that becomes very washboard and rutted, and that's a heavy maintenance, very frequent obligation of DPW. So for all those reasons, now there are traffic calming suggestions along the corridor, and that's something that's being incorporated into the design. I'm sorry?
Are they in this packet?
No.
I don't believe this version of it does, which just like we do every month when we talk about this issue, we'll have the latest rendering of
So
the plan progress from GPI, who's the designer of record. I just didn't have those plans for this meeting, but they are, they exist. I'll just share that and we can talk about it at the November meeting.
And can I ask one more question? Have you guys gotten feedback from the residents of this road? Are they all in favor of this?
I think Rob could speak that a little bit better than I have. He's been in charge of the public outreach sessions, but there's been at least 3 public outreach sessions with not only the Surfside Association, but specifically with homeowners along the way. At the homeowner association at the hostel down in Surfside Beach, and then here at the public safety facility. I unfortunately just didn't attend those, but I hear nothing but positive feedback.
I got some negative feedback.
Okay. You did.
Definitely. Yeah, no, but I think that comes down to the hard decisions that we have to make as a town that's growing at the rate that we're growing at. And if we're going to approve the level of development that's being approved, then there's going to have to be, I think, some sacrifices that are made in terms of improving our infrastructure. And you have a 60-foot layout. I mean, in my mind, it's drastic to say this, but I could see that being the exact carbon copy of Fairgrounds Road. And that's going to alleviate,
30.
right, which is drastic to folks that live along that road, but I think our overall community-wide, in terms of the congestion that we're facing and that development that was approved at Richmond, now has a whole nother way. I mean, what's going to happen when you get to 5 Point? I get all of these discussions, but it's a public road.
It's a public road that doesn't drain well. It's dirt, unpaved.
I just think we should not be thinking about getting rid of all of our rural roads, regardless. I mean, Burnell Street on Sconset got paved because John Keane put in a development, Blackfish Lane. It is now the main thoroughfare to cut through Sconset Village. Everybody drives down there and up Clifton Street to Sankaty to bypass the entire Sconset Village.
And waivers were granted.
And that road was specifically designed with traffic calming, so it was curvy, it does nothing.
The small curves, small radiuses don't work. People drive the center line, Shockamole Road. It doesn't. You either have to have much larger. It doesn't work in a small.
Is it straightened road?
Right. So that's not necessarily, in my opinion, as an engineer, that works as a traffic calming. I think the most part is strict enforcement, which gets back to limited resources. I think that our police face. I mean, I think it's a growing community problem, but
No, there are needs to add crossings along Lover's Lane so people that actually live on the east side of the road can get over to the path, which is going to be, I'm going to guess 50 feet away from the edge of the roadway. So it's going to be definitely buried into the woods. So you do need some access to that. These crossing locations are opportunities for, say, raised crosswalks, speed tables. Those could be traffic calming elements to provide some vertical deflection, not just the horizontal that a lot of us agree just aren't as effective as we think that they may be.
I think the whole idea would be to move volume. I mean, hear what you're saying, Eric. I don't, but it's to move volume of traffic down Lover's Lane. It's another way to deal with the congestion that currently exists. Before they put a shovel in the ground over there, by the way, the current situation as it exists is nobody on Front Road from end to end traffic.
Yeah.
Right? And Old South Road now we see all the way up past Lover's Lane, going towards town, and then we see it past Lover's Lane going towards the airport. So that would have to be a road that would be paved going, like you just said, mirroring Fairgrounds posted at 30 miles an hour.
Right.
Move the volume of traffic off Old South Road, which is a complete contrary to what you're saying. I get it.
Has there been any thought about locating the bike path on the houses side only because you've got a lot of families with young kids, and a lot of them are year-round that live on that side, and if there aren't gonna be easy access to cross the bike path, they're gonna be on the road with traffic going 30, 40 miles an hour. Until they can get to a speed table to cross onto the sidewalk.
That did come up during the public sessions. I think Rob could speak that a little better than I could, but it seemed from talking to him that it was more acceptable to have it if the opportunity does, if it's a real opportunity to have the path on Champ Richard's side of the road, to have the path on that side of the road, because you get that aesthetic.
Well, I think, if I may, that if what they're looking, what most of the residents are, this is my interpretation, seeking, is that the road would stay essentially where it is, though get wider, and the bike path would go on to the other property, the property of Camp Richard, which then maintains the buffer. If you go down Lover's Lane, you'll see there's a row of telephone poles that seem like they're in these people's front yard. They're not. They're in the road layout. So what could happen, to the other design point, would be to keep the road where it is, put the bike path towards the telephone poles and towards the houses. My belief is that the residents don't favor that because they're hoping to preserve the vegetated portion of the road. Instead of that, they'd rather see the infrastructure go on to the other private property on the other side than to have it go into the public layout, because it'll keep a bigger buffer to them.
Well, that, and nobody wants to actually conflict with the bicyclists in their driveway. I
And
think
then
that
all
the
the
fatality
driveway
that we had
cuts is
earlier
the
this
other.
summer really
If you have,
had
it
an
is
effect.
nicer on a bike path to have no interruption of driveway, which you get on the west side. You would have a nice straight, and I personally mountain bike that whole area and that little trail, so I don't like this personally, but I think if you look at it from the greater good of the public within essentially what's becoming our urban area, it's the right decision, in my opinion. So we'll see plans next time then.
Yeah, this will be an ongoing item on the agenda. So if there's no other comments, we'll table for next month. Where we leave off, item 6, request for street light on Orange Street at Goose Pond Lane and lighting along in-town bike path. Here, where was this at? We passed all this. Did I pass it? Where are we at? Oh, here we go. All right, there's a letter in the packet from the resident there, I believe that's 124 Orange Street. Julie Young, she did ask for one of the utility poles shown on this map grayed out. The yellow dots are utility poles with lights. The gray ones are utility poles without lights. I believe they're asking for the one that intersects Bear Street. Do you all see where that is on the map there?
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I make a motion to,
Do we like? Well, I guess it comes down to one of these two.
because the other ways are lit, the one that's at Bear Street makes the most sense.
Right.
Bear Street.
But Goose Pond will bring light down Goose Pond Road to where the bike path is extended.
Where
Look how the
crosswalk is.
spacing is
Yeah.
of every other pole, you'd maintain that.
No, I like the, well, if I may.
Go right ahead.
I like the
Your
idea
voting member,
right
Angus.
at Goose Pond, right? So when you come out of the new bike path and you try and turn right, so I travel that on a bike, so
Yeah.
I'm familiar with it at dusk as well. So
Mhm.
it's hard to see right. You can see left with clear sight. It's hard to see right with low light. And although I hear what you're saying in terms of evenly spacing them, I think
The greater
lighting up
need.
that intersection would be a better idea than trying to light up the intersection for a pole further down the road.
It will illuminate a biker trying to come out of the intersection.
No, I'm fine with it, but makes sense. So I make a motion to recommend the installation of a street light on the existing pole located at the intersection of Orange and Goose Pond Lane.
I would second that.
Made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous. All right, now the other part of this is lighting along the path itself. Now we have from Goose Pond all the way up to Washington Street Extension. And quite honestly, there's probably a number of different bollard fixtures that we could add through here, but that was the request to, this is a very dark corridor. Some people like it dark. I think that's the challenge here is how well do we want this lit? Just the
Well,
path
so-
itself, or
From a police perspective,
go right ahead, safescape.
lighting it up would be the absolute best idea. As soon as the sun goes down,
Mhm.
until the sun goes back up, illuminate.
I'm not sure, was there future infrastructure put in, underground conduit, stuff like that, or future lighting or anything?
No. I'm thinking we may have to do some kind of a solar-powered, low-lying. Well, we got to look at some examples. I don't think the overhead street lamps are going to work here. But we got to get a little creative and maybe do something a little bit more. I don't.
Those bollards. with the
Ground
lights,
level,
Yeah.
Yeah, those are effective.
not all that different than what we have connecting this property to the two fairgrounds. But
Right.
yeah,
They're low, they're like 4 feet off the ground.
exactly. Some kind of bollard lighting system, or even something even simpler.
Yeah, lights are deterrent, you know, bottom line there, deterrent, crime wise.
Safety on the bike path too, I think, I like that actually.
Okay. So maybe a motion to research fixture types
And spacing.
and spacing. I mean, this is kind of like a project to design and,
Is remain all done?
you know, you just read my mind. This sounds like something we ought to kick over to BPAC.
Totally.
Yeah.
They'd be all over it.
All right, is there a motion to refer this to Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee?
So moved.
What is that called again? Pedestrian.
Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, so the motion will be to refer lighting of the railroad causeway between Goose Pond Lane and Washington Street Extension to the Bicycle and Pedestrian
They'd
Advisory
be all
Committee.
over it,
Okay.
absolutely would.
Concom, on the other hand.
Well,
Never mind.
well, that's the bollard lighting, so that's the answer to that.
So Art,
It's illuminating in the air, it's illuminating out on the ground.
I'm sorry, did you get Art as the motion and who'd you have a second?
I
Angus?
don't know, I think Angus, did you say?
Sure.
Okay, there we go.
Proposed circulation.
Volunteer.
All right, item number 7 is a plan that was developed by Holly Backus in our office concerning the arrival and departure traffic flows at the new parking lot at the elementary school, including the fact that there's a sketch and what's projected as a sketch showing the circulation. What it's really hard to see is a red line marking a center line through the parking lot. I'm sure if we
That's a good idea.
I don't have kids, so I don't really know the nightmare that apparently this is. So if anybody else wants to chime in and suggest maybe a
What is it now? Is it just two-way throughout?
It's just a free for all. It's just wide with it's unstriped. So sometimes folks are just, and it's the curve isn't the best, right? So some folks who are better with vehicles, can stay tight, and others kind of jack through the curved part. And then see how she's got the lower right arrow going that way. A lot of times, folks take a right there to come back out this way, so it creates conflicts there. So it's a good, kind of, I think, circulation pattern to sign it this way. And I think the center striping, I don't know that you necessarily need it or that there's enough room. I don't know the exact width along where she shows the crosswalk there. But on the circle, I mean, it's still tight. I mean, it really needs to, my sense is that center aisle needs to be, center island needs to be smaller.
You're talking about
But
this one right
yeah,
here. We
right.
just don't
'cause
have room for two-way flow around
you
this.
probably you could make it work. People definitely get around there. It's just it's tight if that was smaller. So to start, I wouldn't see why, for the cost of essentially some paint. and some probably basic signs. I think we could recommend this to the school committee, I assume, would want to weigh in.
Okay. No, I think that's, Diane O'Neill does have a copy of this, but right now it's just being batted from our office to Diane O'Neill's office, and I'm bringing it to this committee just to get additional thoughts. Angus, I don't know if you want to have the, who's the school resource?
Cassie and, Cassie Thompson and, Keith Mansfield.
Keith Mansfield, that's what I was thinking of. I don't know if you want to have them take a look at this and get their thoughts, but the idea is to share this. Maybe we come back in November and have a better thought out recommendation.
I'll do just that.
Okay. You understand Art's point of view on some of these issues? You can talk to.
Yeah, I just, my sense is that that's really big in there, but
You mean the width going through there?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's really wide.
it's pretty wide. I mean, it's wide enough that a bus can park and someone can
Absolutely.
get around it. You know, my thinking is just making it real easy would be small. I think it'll work. I think the striping
I do too.
would, people just don't know. There's no direction.
Sense of it.
Right.
Right.
And thermoplastic, obviously, because of all the
Yeah.
turning.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
I thought when the plans came in for the landscaping, that somewhere in there was supposed to be for buses only, no parental drop-off.
That's
I
on the
might be
other
wrong.
side of the
It's on
parking
the
lot.
other side?
Correct.
Okay,
So on the other side of that.
alrighty.
Now, again, I don't really know for sure, but I'm told that outside of this issue, when people do use this the way it's designed to function, it works very, very well.
Mhm.
It's just this would help delineate and keep these instances where people don't conform to the circulation
Imagine
from
that.
gumming things up.
Well, it's not real clear. You know,
No,
I
it's
think
small
this is
arrows.
this is a method of clarification. It probably matches the intent.
Yeah.
Looks logical to me.
Okay. All right, so we'll hold this off. Angus, I'm assuming you'll bring something back for the next meeting. Okay, so we'll table this issue. And where are we on the agenda?
That does it.
I think we hit everything. Any other business? Seeing none.
Motion to adjourn.
We'll accept the minutes, please.
Accept the minutes.
There's really quick on the agenda, I believe it says the 23rd. It's actually the 20th.
Okay.